Welcome to the BizDad Podcast, where we dive into the melding of fathership and entrepreneurship with your host, the original BizDad himself, Adam Labar. Adam is a Christian, a former Air Force officer, a dad to 3 amazing kids, a coach, a real estate investor, and a business owner. On this podcast, he'll explore the unique journeys of amazing dads who are striving for greatness in both business and family. So whether you're a dad who is an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a man striving to be a better dad, get ready as the BizDad brings you conversations to inspire, challenge, and equip you to be a better dad and entrepreneur. And now, here's Adam.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad Podcast. Today, I am super thrilled to talk to another military veteran and business owner, Keith Phillips, father of 6 kids. But I'll let you kind of go through all of that. But really looking forward to getting to know you a little bit more and hear some more of your story. So, Keith, if you can, without further ado, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about your family, and then tell us about your business.
So, yeah, my name is Keith Phillips. I am the husband of Becky and the father of Annika, Nora, Grace, Trace, Martin, Willie, Bob, Mercy. I think that was 6. I don't know. Sometimes I lose count. And we live in southernmost Illinois in the middle of nowhere. And, we struggle with internet issues as I have today. And we do all kinds of things. The biggest business, though, is HeartlandBunkies.com, otherwise known as Bunkie Life Heartland, at Bunkie Life Heartland on all the things. And basically, I have a marketing license to try to translate a Canadian idea to the United States. This idea of bunkies, which in Canada, it's a bunkhouse, Canadian shorthand for bunkhouse. And in Canada, they very often have a little house, a cottage by the lake, especially in Ontario. It's kind of like Minnesota. They got a gazillion lakes. And when the kids have kids, there's not enough room for everybody. So they throw up a bunkie beside it, and the kids sleep there so that there's room for everybody to get together. So extra space for meaningful connection has kind of been the motto of the company. And there's more story behind that. But David and Carrie that started the company in 2017, I got connected with them, and I had no background to be doing this. I had no background in marketing. I was a U.S. Army helicopter pilot that then got out to become a pastor and go to seminary, and then didn't make it through seminary. Ended up flying medevac helicopters for a long time, but I finally have kind of made the cut from any kind of big companies or anything, and just on my own now, and working as essentially a marketer, but the family's heavily involved in that, in the content production. We also end up building a lot of these for ourselves and for others. And then that also works into our short-term rental business. We've got 2 of those now. We've had others in the past. We also had long-term rentals at one point, but we don't anymore. And then because we're not busy enough with just that, we also roast some coffee and sell some of it. And when we find a good deal on a horse, we buy it and train it for a little bit, and then try to sell it for a little bit of a profit.
There you go. That's all. Yeah, you got quite a bit going on, and
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to digging into some of this as a prior military guy myself and a private pilot. I don't do anything on the commercial side or anything like that, but
nice.
And a guy that's very interested in. I was so I was a prior enlisted guy. I got out, so I was a canine handler for a while and did a bunch of stuff, and then got out, ended up getting married, and then I signed up for, I was going to go to Liberty University and get my degree in theology, and I still have debated about going back to get my degree in theology and going back to finish that up, or really to start it, because I never even got to start it, but I applied for going back active duty as a pilot, and to go be a federal marshal, a U.S. Marshal for as an agent, and I started my theology degree. Well, I got picked up by the Air Force and by the Marshals at the same time, and I went, oh man, now what do I do? And then the DOJ had a hiring freeze, so that paused my class date on the Marshal side of the house. join the Air Force, go back in to go be a pilot, and I have to cancel my theology degree. So, anyways, all that being said, I'm really looking forward to digging into some of that. And I wish I had 6 kids.
Parallels here are kind of like crazy.
Yeah. I only have 3 kids. I wish I had 6. I told my wife I'd have 7 if she'd let me, but she said that after we broke 40, we got to stop with kids. We can't keep having kids anymore. So eventually, we want to retire and be grandparents and enjoy ourselves as grandparents. So, but anyways, I want to, before I go into all those things that I'd love to chat about, I want to rewind a little bit to kind of go back to, we'll call it your origin story, if you will. Kind of tell me a little bit about what it was like for you growing up, especially if you can give some details about your dad. Oftentimes, if we can sit down and think about who our dad is or was, it kind of tells us. I always try to remember who said it, and I recently heard Patrick Bet-David say this, but I don't remember if he's the original one that I heard say it. But he talks about how at the beginning stages you like idolize your dad, and then you demonize your dad, and then you what's the last one? Basically, you start to relate to him more. There's another word for it, but I can't remember what it is. But like you actually can learn like who he is or what he was. So if you can, like, walk me through some of how that worked for you as a kid with your dad.
Yeah. So my dad, I never had a break, like a hard break with my dad. My dad has always been just a great guy in my esteem. Wasn't that I didn't clench my fist and almost fight him maybe 1 or 2 times when I was a teenager, but it was not personal, if that makes sense. Like, it wasn't that I didn't respect him. It was just like, no, I'm not going to do X, Y, or Z, or what you're telling me to do is going to humiliate me, or whatever the thing was. But it wasn't that we actually had a real rift between us. It was situational. He's different than me in a lot of ways. I'm just ADD as anything. Got to be doing something, preferably something new. My weakness is on maintenance. I'm much more about expansion. Give me something that's about expansion, something that's about breaking some new ground, something I can go just kill it all at once, just go after it and hammer, then that's great. If you want me to go out and do it for 20 minutes a day, that's rough. I know that my weakness is on the habit side. My dad is the opposite. He has the habits. He does exactly what he's supposed to do for the most part. There are ways, like, if I could grow in any ways, it would be to become more like my dad. Now, from like a vocational aspect, and this really gets into my sort of big thesis that like my and my wife's podcast is about, and what I've written about a bit, is something that my dad is starting to come around to, I think, but he was in this sort of generational break. Our big idea with our podcast and some of the writing and stuff, and then to some extent, well, definitely how we're living our lives, but also what we sort of push with HeartlandBunkies.com is families actually working together as opposed to just recreating together, which modern society has mostly relegated the family to. Family time is just goof off time. So goof off together as opposed to apart. And there's a great amount of hollowness to that. Well, my dad's father was in World War II, and he walked away from the farm and said, that was a whole lot of work. I want to do something else. And, when he got back from World War II, he didn't go back to the farm. So he took the bait of modernity and said, I'll take the 40-hour work week, the paid vacation, the stability, the healthcare, the retirement, pension, whatever. And he told my dad, put that wrench down, go study. And so my dad did that, and he did it well. And he just retired recently, with a pretty decent amount of money in his 401k. And actually just recently loaned me a little bit of money to do more expansion stuff, that he will get a bit of reward off of too. But, nice. He did well. He retired as a loan officer, basically. And when I look at my dad, I think of someone who has absolutely done the best that anyone could have done with the cultural expectations and the idea of what the good life is, as anybody could do. What's happened to me And this has been partly through something that just seems to be innate, and partly through reading and maybe just generational experiences, is that I don't want that. That's not the path I want to go. And I'm seeing where my grandfather was not just wrong to go for this new idea of the good life, but no one had ever told him from like an educational and theological aspect that the life he had or could have was actually a very good life, that the true and the good and the beautiful were very easily exemplified in the life he had and the community he had. And so the greatest generation, they're the ones that kind of walked away from that. And then it wasn't very long before their kids despised their Pleasant Valley Sunday upbringings, and you had the 60s. So something went terribly awry at that point, and we tend to blame it on, the hippies or whatever, but it can't be, right? Because they were just kids. So something happened to them. And what I tend to trace that to is that man's calling to work that's given to him in Genesis 2:15 has been essentially abandoned as having anything to do with a good life. And now a good life is one in which you've worked hard enough, fast enough, with a great enough efficiency that you can stop working. And you can just be entertained, and you can be a consumer. So instead of being a producer, as God calls us to be, as He's created us to be, we've been turned into consumers. Now, while my dad, I think, has lived in popular consumer society and been very affected by it, at the same time, he hasn't been. And I respect him all the more because of that. And now that I've been, reading the kind of stuff I've been reading and writing the kind of stuff I've been writing, and he's reading it, when he comes to visit us, if like me and the kids go out to do some chores, like instead of going and like checking his email, he like quickly throws his shoes on to follow us out and stays with us through the tasks. And so nice. When work can actually pull the family together, there's a lot of interesting things that happen. You don't have to do work-life balance anymore, right? Because they're the same thing. If we think of work on one side of the teeter-totter and life or family on the other side. Well, what if we just move them to the middle, and then everything we lean into is just good?
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know if that hopefully I gave you something to chew on there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot going on there. I really like it a lot. And I'm going to make an assumption. I didn't ask this yet, but do you guys homeschool your kids?
We do. Yeah.
Okay. I assume so. I homeschool my kids as well. Absolutely love it. I think it was the best decision we've made in a long time.
The work of children is their education, right? So if you don't, if dad's going to work here, mom's going to work there, kids are going to work there, and there, then work becomes a thing that divides you as opposed to a thing that unites you. So bringing the education home and the work home and becoming a productive unit, not just productive individuals, has been great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it helps in the interconnectedness of our family. We're all together. Like, usually when I'm here doing something in my office, I've got their desks over here. If they're choosing to sit at their desk that day doing some work, unless they're hanging upside down on the playground doing their work, who knows? But they're usually right here listening to my phone calls, being involved, asking me what's going on. Hey, what did you mean by this? Like, I'll get done with a phone call and they'll ask me a bunch of questions about what was going on. And I absolutely love that because it allows me to connect with them on a different level. They get to see what dad actually does. And one thing I love that you hit on, and it was something that I've been really hammering home with my sons recently, is like, my wife's getting ready to retire from the military next year. She's got, she'll hit her 20 next year and she's done. And they're like, boy, but dad's never going to retire. And I was like, dude, I don't see the word retirement anywhere in the Bible. That's it's not there. Like, I don't ever want to stop.
Not there.
Like, there's always something for me to be able to do, right? Even if retirement, quote unquote, looks like me out in my own field of my 100-acre forest, making sure the crops are going and I've got things going and I'm donating things or whatever it is. Like, I'm going to be doing something all the time. I can't foresee me stopping, and it's a and that's something I want to hammer home with them. But work doesn't have to be something, again, that separates the family. And I love that. I love that you said it that way. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast too, is for me to, what I always used to tell everybody and still kind of do is, The whole intention of this podcast was to gather people on here to steal all of their good ideas, and hopefully somebody else gets something too. But if I could steal some good ideas from everybody else, like you're already giving me some nuggets in my brain that help me think through let me be more intentional, even more intentional about what I'm doing with this homeschool, and even more intentional about working from home. Like, what can I do to engage my kids more in the business? So how is it that, you mentioned like bringing the family together and doing all that. How do you, in the age range you have, it was 5 to 16 years old, integrate them into what you're doing as a business? How are they all involved in what you're doing?
Good question. So actually, I have to correct myself. It's now 6 to 16 until
6 to
February.
16. All right.
And then it'll be 6 to 17.
Very good.
How are we bringing everybody together kind of at the same time? That's a difficult thing to do. Interestingly enough, I took a picture. Maybe I'll share this with you. I took a picture yesterday of my wife, if not all 6, at least 5 of the 6, and one other kid from a different family, all gathered around our dining room table doing math.
Nice.
And they were doing math in this pretty interesting thing that just came out. We do classical conversations, and they just came out with a thing called Math Map, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. And you are, all the kids are doing the same thing, but the older kids are doing it more deeply. And they're having conversations that touch on the nature of existence, the nature of beauty and goodness while they're doing math. So the education aspect is massive. You can't underestimate that. From a work perspective, it is, I would say, a rarity when we're all doing the same thing together. But like just this morning, myself, my 11-year-old son, and my 6-year-old daughter, the baby, were doing the chores with the chickens. We're kind of low on animals right now. We just have horses and chickens. We obviously have goats too, but they're not doing anything productive. At any rate, we've had more before. We're going to have more again. But we're kind of light on chores right now. But one of the things that I was convicted about yesterday, actually, I was interviewing a couple, Sean and Beth Doherty, who are kind of in this homesteading thing. And one of the things they talked about was just the necessity to have these daily rhythms, habits, and doing those chores every morning, whether you want to or not, regardless of the weather. It's good for you. It ultimately makes you happier. And you also, because you're doing it, you end up being there at these really, really beautiful moments that you would otherwise miss. This morning, we've kind of got an intermediate, kind of a stopgap measure chick brooder right now, which consists of a kid's swimming pool, hard plastic swimming pool with some various things around it and put on top of it to keep the chicks. And 2 of them had gotten out, but they were trapped like in between layers, so to speak. And we didn't know they were there, and we don't know how long they'd been there. And I kind of thought at least one of them was going to die, but they're doing great, actually. So all of that we did this morning. And I was able to instruct my son. And I say I felt convicted because I've kind of pushed off a lot of these individual tasks to the kids and expect them to do them. And I haven't been as hands-on, and I'm trying to get back into that. So this morning was like a really, really good 30 minutes as we sort of reorganized, rethought about how we were doing the chicks. He got to think about it. He still had to do the work, but he was being coached. And I was being coached too, because frankly, the dude studies agriculture and chickens all the time, and I learn stuff from him, like crazy. The bigger projects, though, what'll happen, and this will answer another question about like getting kids to work. The larger projects, like building a cabin, you start off with a pretty good crew, and like with our kits from our company, it's a giant flat pack with all these pre-cut notched pieces that go together, and actually like taking everything apart and putting all of the like pieces together is a big task. Depending on the kit, take between 15 minutes and an hour and a half to do that. and it takes a lot of hands make it go faster. So we start off with like everybody working together pretty hard. We get a lot of good videos of kids carrying stuff and whatnot for online content. And then, as things go, like the little kids, really want to be involved. It's like, Dad, let me use that impact driver. I want a hammer, and it's like, hold on, buddy. And they get to do it a little bit. And you try not to get in a hurry, because you know that taking the time with them to build those skills now is ultimately, profitable for you. It's gonna put those skills in them so they can use them later when they're more competent at it. But they do trail off. Like after they've done a few, they're like, okay, and they go to playing. But they go to playing out in the field beside where you're building the cabin, with sticks, with tools that you're not using, with each other, coming up with new games, writing their own sets of rules. Maybe they're playing baseball with a rock or a ball and a stick or whatever. They are the referees. They are the rule makers. They are the enforcers. They are the coaches. And, so as the day drags on, you kind of lose some of them, and then they come and go as, in rhythm with the work itself. And those are some of the most, I think, really profitable times for those kids, because they go in between actually working with you and then sort of fantastically playing at work by themselves. And they're seeing project management happen, even if they don't know that, right? But it's all coming to them in this very organic state in which they sort of self-regulate how much they can take. Because we can tell our kids, like, do it because I said so. But if we're out there doing it, they're not perfect. They're not unfallen little, Rousseauian sponges. They're sponges, but they're not Rousseauian sponges. They're not innocent. They're bent towards sin, but they're also they still carry with them a great deal of common grace. So they're gonna, come back and forth and engage in the work and get away from the work, and that's fine. That's how life has been for most people for a long time. But the one thing we're not doing is we're not putting them through a program to stamp them out to be a particular wheel in a particular machine. They're gonna just grow as an individual.
Yeah,
but
I
together.
love that. I together as a family, and with the values and guidelines that you've created instead of what the world has created. You're curating their own content. On what they receive.
What's on the buffet? They only get to eat what's on the buffet that you give them.
Yep. Yeah.
But
exactly.
It's still a buffet.
And I was talking to some folks yesterday in this mastermind that I'm in, and it was a dad call, and some people were talking about, like, how do you regulate kind of your kids on screens? Like, what is it that you guys do? And like, of course they were talking about, what is it? This book that just recently came out that talks about, it's the something generation, and I can't remember what it is. But it talks about all of the various stresses and, mental disorders that all these kids are having these days, and how they just can't stay focused on all these things because they're stuck in the world of TikTok and YouTube all the time, and screens and Roblox and all the nonsense. And, some of that is not so bad, right? Because some technology is good for them to understand. But when that is their life, there's so much more. Like, if you're adding that to the buffet, and, it's okay if that's the dessert at the end that you allow once in a while to have that dessert. But if that's the main course, you're really in for a rough ride, right? The main course needs to be much more about life and working with each other and the enjoyment of family. And, it just, I love hearing what you're doing. And I always tell my wife that I want, like, my own, and I think I've already said it on here, but my 100-acre forest, right? I want my 100 acres where I can be out there with the family. I can have extended family. Like, I've already thought about, like, you talking about these bunkhouses. Like, if I had 3 of those out there on my property as well, that can invite folks over whenever the heck they want to, like, you're more than welcome with, horses, chickens, everything. But then we could travel whenever we want to. We do it. I mean, I love what you're doing. I love the engagement with the kids. I do have one very big question, because and this is more for me and maybe we're not in the same personality, but if we are, I would love your advice on this. But I really want to involve the kids in a lot of stuff that I'm doing, but when I have a task in front of me, let's say I'm working on the truck, right? I'm doing something that is a task in front of me. You're building one of these bunkhouses. I'm working on the truck. I'm doing some sort of manual task that I know that my boys want to be involved in, and I want them to be involved in it. But man, oh man, am I very task oriented, and I need to get this thing done. And you can't walk into a task being extremely task oriented and involve a 9 and a 5-year-old. There's got to be some give and take in that, because I do want to accomplish the task, but part of my task I need to, and I'm saying this out loud, knowing that one of the things I need to do is part of this task is raising these boys to be strong men that are capable. So how do I accomplish both of those tasks at the same time without going bald by the end of the day? How do you manage having them work and be in and out of the project and all of that stuff? How have you gotten yourself to a point, or have you gotten yourself to a point where that's just normal and that's okay and you could work through it?
I have no idea.
Okay, good. All right. All right, I feel better.
I mean, I do, right? And you do too.
Yeah.
It's not like we don't know, but there are probably people that don't. And I don't think me and you or neither of us are that person. We just have to do what we know. How can we do what we know? How can we set ourselves up to do what we know? By the way, now I'm talking to myself, just like you were. If there's more, if you've got the margin already, then, and you're not trying to do too much, then it's gonna come more naturally. Now I'm really being a total hypocrite. So, do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah.
Just having the margin to begin with puts you in a state of mind that you can actually let this 6-year-old boy completely not take your brake calipers apart, but pretend he is, try to, for the next however many minutes, and stretch this 30-minute task out to a 45-minute or hour one. We have to be reminded probably what our roles are. Why are we here? And we're here to get stuff done, but one of the things we're here to get done is the training of our children. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm failing to come up with something particularly useful.
No, I think that
principle to guide.
I will say you really did. And I wrote it down in that way. If you have the margin, and I kind of adjusted it as I was writing it, but it allows that freedom. It allows that freedom for me if I have the margin, which I don't. So I tend to not have the margin in my life that allows me, there's always a task list that's 7,000 pages long that makes me want to say, hey, I need to get these things done right now so that I can move on to the next thing to get done, which leaves my
Can I host the podcast for just a sec?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question.
Please.
But it's gonna be a bad host question, because I'm gonna put so many caveats in it. Okay, so like I was saying earlier, there's so many problems and choices that people just didn't deal with in the past. One of the problems that I think the great problem of today and probably the foreseeable future is the problem of abundance. What do you do in abundance? But disciplined people or whatever can just eat less stuff, do more stuff, and not get fat, right? And then less disciplined people, well, go to Walmart, you'll see them, right? But there's what we are going to deal with was what I'm calling poison potential. We have the potential to be filthy, stinking rich, okay? Any of us. I have met really rich people that are not very smart, okay? But either they were lucky or they were hardworking, okay? And they can plod away and get filthy, stinking rich. The potential to be there, the potential for exponential gain, if I just accomplish this thing, if I just do this much more, is paralyzing in some ways, right? Because it stops us. It's a sort of tyranny of the urgent that stops us from choosing the best for ourselves and for our families. So, having given you that diatribe, Adam, how do we protect ourselves from letting the poison of potential destroy us?
So partly, and I think I've told this story once or twice on this particular podcast, but I think it fits well here, is I had created, when I started this entrepreneurial thing, I was a paycheck to paycheck guy for a very long time as an enlisted guy, had no idea any different.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I saw my parents do, so that's just what I did. So once I started to learn that anybody, like you said, could become filthy rich and have some crazy life, I was like, I'm going to be one of those people. It took me a long time to kind of mentally go through it, but I built this entire life out of what I wanted, what kind of plane I was going to own, what kind of places we were going to, like what kind of houses we were going to have, what kind of all the stuff that we were going to do. And none of it was coordinated with my wife. I didn't talk to her about any of it. I didn't have her input on any of it. I just built what our future was going to be. And I thought to myself, I've got it. And my wife, much more simple than me as far as that goes. She's like, no, I just like, as long as I have a roof over my head and I'm comfortable, like, I think we're going to be fine. And I had to reset everything and kind of go, hey, like I had all of these goals on like what buildings I was going to be buying, how many units of apartment buildings I was going to go buy, and all the stuff that was going to get me to where I wanted to be, because I had that poison of potential. I knew where I could go. I knew what I could be capable of doing. And then when I finally sat down and I said, wait a minute, like this isn't what my wife wants at all. And if it's not what she wants, then it's not what I want, because what I want is to be with my wife.
Yeah.
And if I'm going down a different path that leads away from my wife, then that's the wrong path. Like I'm not on the right track here. So I promise I'm coming back into this. So what I have caught myself doing now is I corrected a lot of that, and then I start to go do the same thing again, because my brain wants to go and find this new potential and these new things and this other thing that I can build, and now that blah 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 blah. So how do we do it, right? And I think part of it for me has been to have a better pulse when I'm on a good pulse with my wife, as far as like, hey, we sit down every quarter and we talk about these things. What are we doing this quarter? How are things going to go? What's our plan for this year? It keeps me on a much sharper track to say, hey, I'm not going off on a deep end here. I'm still chasing what is best for us as a family. And it slows me down from chasing the things that sure may make us filthy rich, but it's going to take away from my time with my wife, going to take away from time with my kids. So again, being a hypocrite, as you had said earlier, as aren't we all, if we're completely honest with ourselves, I need to continually do that all the time, is to remind myself, hey, like stick to these few things that are going to keep you as a family unit closer, that are going to keep you guys on the same path, that are going to keep you guys being me and like me and my 3 kids and wife, and just to be together and focused and engaged with each other. It doesn't matter if I have millions and millions of dollars. It matters if I have a solid relationship with my family and my kids grow up to be amazing, productive members of society who are, God-fearing men and women, right? So that's much more important to me.
Yeah.
So I think I answered your question as far as like, how do we do that? But that doesn't mean that I'm practicing it at the moment.
Yeah. Have you noticed, I don't know if this directly transfers to entrepreneurship, but there are people, among whom I am one, who overestimate what we can get done in a day and underestimate what we can get done in 5 years.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's most people, I think, is that, yeah.
But it's, I don't, is it most people?
I think, well, maybe it's just because of it fits really well with entrepreneurs, right? They like,
it does.
and it's something that we talk about a lot, right? And so maybe I think it's most people because those are most of the people I'm around. But maybe it's not, right? Because if I look back at my military time, that's not necessarily the way we looked at it at all, right? Yeah. Maybe it's not most people. Yeah.
Because a lot of what the military does is incredibly inefficient, as you know,
massively.
painfully, right? But it's all written in blood. Mm-hmm. So like there's a reason it's done that way. The military is like a 2-cycle engine. It's like if you're going to build an engine that's 100 cc's and you need it to be as powerful as possible and you do not care about efficiency, you'll build a 2-cycle engine. Mm-hmm. Because you can dump a ton of gas in that sucker and get a lot of power out of it when you want it. And it's going to cost a lot of money in gas. That's how the military is. but it also doesn't want to self-destruct. So it spends a lot of time as, just in risk mitigation. And risk mitigation is not efficient in the short term. And the way the military practices it, I would argue it's probably not efficient in the long term either. But it does, it preserves the force. But what we do in terms of our personal lives, it kind of comes back to the sort of 80-20 thing. If I shoot to do less in one day, I'll get the 80 out of that important 20, and I'll preserve myself to do more over the week and the month and the year and the 5 years. And in the meantime, I'm going to have time to let my kid fumble with that wrench when I'm changing those brakes.
Yeah, that's valid. It's I've heard, it's a slightly different context, but it popped in my brain as you were talking about that. Alex Hormozy talk about like the diet thing, right? Where let's say you're on a diet and, you're like, oh, well, I mean, I already had, the cookie earlier today, so I might as well, blow through and have a bunch of other garbage today too, because this day's already shot. Like most people are only looking at the day, but have you counted how many calories you need in a week to be able to plan out what your week actually looks like as opposed to just your day? Where if we could kind of if I could figure out with my kids, like what does my week look like with them, as opposed to planning my day with them and how I can integrate it. Okay, well, on this day, I know I can plan 2 hours to go work on the car, and as opposed to just, hey guys, I'm going to go work on the car right now, and I try to fit it in, then it ends up being a more stressful time for everybody as opposed to planning it out, because I don't do well with the planning side of the house. It's not really my forte as far as building out that plan, but having that larger, longer view on things, I think is going to be. I think it's important. It's not something that I'm very good at, but I do think it's important. I should rephrase that. It's something I can get good at if I put the brain bites to it. That's I like that a lot. I want to go down a route. Like I'm curious how you have a dad. When you were growing up, was your dad always a loan officer?
He was always working his way there. So he worked for GMAC, and that became Ally Bank. It just rebranded after the great financial crisis, restructuring stuff. And so I think he retired with 29 years. Sorry.
Wow. All right. How did the son of a banker go and decide to go fly Chinooks in the Army?
In total rebellion, I guess. Now,
okay.
It's pretty amazing. Sociologists have done this stuff, or whoever studies these things. That like first children, second children, third children, fourth children, like they tend to have these attributes in common with each other. And there's actually, I read something recently about the disappearing middle child. Like the world and the United States and the West in particular, like have less middle children than they've ever had before. Like remarkably. Like there was a time in history when there were more middle children than there were first and last children, right? And now it's not the case. So there are these people who are negotiating between sort of extremes. And that's how they grew up. And it shaped them. They feasibly could have been the first or the last, but the experience they grew up in made them that person. And that's like a disappearing personality in the world, which is kind of scary. And so I don't know how much of it was just my place in the family, the time I grew up in, the fact that I saw Top Gun when I was however old I was over at my friend's house, because my parents wouldn't let me watch it, but I got to my friend's house and we watched it, and we did not fast forward through that one scene. No, they didn't.
Of course not. Absolutely not.
But really, all I wanted to see was the dogfight scenes. That was we would fast forward to the dogfight scenes and just watch those over and over again. And so that had something to do with it. I think also there was, for me, always a sort of chasing after enchantment that I saw in the military. And to some extent, I may have seen in church. But I would argue that I actually saw it, at least ideally, in my imagination of what the military was. I saw it more there than even in church. that you got from ceremony and saluting, playing taps, and you seeing I want to say a flock of soldiers, a group of soldiers, whatever, sailors, airmen, Marines, stopping what they're doing, standing up straight, turning towards the music and saluting during taps or whatever, So there's something that I was very much drawn to. And I think what that thing I was drawn to was the acknowledgement of some transcendent other, some greater thing. And military ceremony points towards that. Like when you do a change of command ceremony, like why do you need to do it? You sign the paper and then it's legal, right? But no, you have to have the passing of the guidon and all this ceremony we go through. And if it's not anymore a recognition that we stand before God in an enchanted world, it's the leftovers of that idea. And so for me, it's partly that. It's partly maybe just the personality of the adventurer, the groundbreaker. Have you ever heard of like 5 expressions of masculinity?
I believe so, but talk to me like I haven't.
So there's like the explorer, the husband, like husbandry, and frankly, I don't remember any of the rest. Let's see here. I want to say the muse, not the muse, the sage. So like wisdom, the wisdom learner and passer honor guy. There's like a couple more, but like, yeah, the explorer, the one who breaks new ground, who builds new stuff, who finds new stuff, like that's me, and that's somebody, and I don't know where this is actually. I need to go hunt this down. Somebody has written a book that was kind of premised on that, these ideas of expressions of masculinity, and I would argue maybe that those are expressions of humanity. But that's just me. I don't know.
Yeah.
I run towards things that are on fire. If something's blowing up, I run towards it.
I tend to be very much the same in that, which is I get so when things are just going normal, I tend to find something that is broken and fidget with it because I just can't. And then it stops me from doing the normal things that I'm supposed to be doing because I've got to be doing something. My brain has to be working more than just what's the normal, which I find, odd when I hear you say that you're like that. But then I think to myself, pilots, very like checklist oriented, got to get the stuff done. Like, hey, this needs to be done. This needs to be done. This needs to be done. How did you kind of mesh that? That hey, all of these requirements of staying very strict with all these things, with checklists and all the stuff that's involved in aviation, with your desire to run towards all that craziness.
Painfully.
Okay. Hence, you're not a CH-47 pilot anymore, right? So
I'm not. I haven't flown. I haven't flown anything for money in almost a year. I haven't flown anything since April. I may fly something again soon, but it'll be fairly adventurous if I do it. It's going to be on a part-time kind of fill-in contract basis.
Yep.
So it's not. That's actually maybe something that's worth talking about in terms of I should have recognized that about myself a long time ago, and it was recognized about me.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the idea of what a particular vocation, particular job is and what it is in reality. And if it were just what you see on Top Gun or Black Hawk Down or whatever, like I've been great. And actually, I would argue, and I don't think anybody could argue against this, when like the heat was on, I was very good at it. If there were actually things blowing up and bullets flying, I was a pretty good guy to have in the seat. I was not the best guy to have in the seat when you're just kind of, figuring out logistics and remember this detail and that detail. Hey, go ahead and leave that door open, buddy. The Wi-Fi is doing weird things. You're good. But, people had told me, as a matter of fact, when I first went to seminary, the guy said, or you asked me what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, I want to go through seminary and I want to go be the pastor of a small church somewhere and just die there. And he was like, yeah, you're not going to do that. I mean, he didn't say that, but he was just like that, hey, if you do that, that's great. To God be the glory. But what I'm seeing here is you maybe you could be like a church planter, you can get things going, but you're not a maintainer. You're a getter going and go get something else going kind of guy. Everything I'm seeing here is like in the, or he didn't say civilian world. What did he say? The secular world, marketing. That was really funny that he said marketing. That's basically what I'm doing now.
And here you are.
Advertising, that kind of stuff. Anything kind of creative, kind of artsy. That's you. And all this time later, here I am. Mm-hmm. And, it was all in the sovereignty of God. I needed to go through all the experiences I went through. And I didn't kill anybody in the process, which is good. But my personality is definitely towards something else. And I've had a really good day today in particular, because I was able to go actually do the things I tell people they should be doing today. I was able to go peck away at one task for a little while, call it good, move on and go peck away at another task for a little while, move on, go get a couple of things from the supply store, come back, eat some food, come do this. And that's what I want my days to look like. It was not a stressed out day.
Nice. I like it. Just for my own curiosity, you mentioned the bullets flying and everything. Did you deploy as a helo pilot?
Yes. And so actually I was enlisted first, like you were. So okay. I initially deployed as a Black Hawk crew chief. And then I did, that was to Iraq. So that was that was the first 15-month deployment.
When was that?
First Armored Division, 2003 into 4.
Okay.
And then I did two tours to Afghanistan that were 1 year each.
Okay. When were those?
9 into 10 and 11 into 12. Those were both with the 82nd. That was flying
so
the Chinook.
Before me and then after me.
Okay. Yeah, that was, especially that last deployment, that was the good one. That's where we got to do stuff. There was a whole lot of boredom on the first pilot deployment. We were over strength, spent more time planning logistics runs for other people than I did flying, and didn't like it. But then the last one, I kind of got it all back because I don't think I ever went a week without actually doing an air assault. Definitely didn't go 2 weeks without doing an air assault, and some weeks did multiple.
Yeah, when I was in Iraq as a K-9 handler, I was an Air Force guy, but I was attached to the Army in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I was in East Baghdad in 06 to 07. Started off with the 101st, and then 2nd ID came in, and I did the majority of my deployment with them. And then Afghanistan, I was attached to the 3rd Group, doing all sorts of fun stuff with those guys as a K-9 handler.
Yeah.
So rode in my fair share of Chinooks getting dropped off in people's front yards, so it was a very interesting time. So I was just curious if our paths would have ever crossed, but
they almost did.
yeah, I was there from 07 to 08 in Afghanistan. But
when you were with group, were you guys with a Afghan Commando Battalion?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
They were attached to us, running around. Yeah. So it was.
We did that.
That was interesting.
We did that every week or two, or less. We were doing that, and that's the best stories I have are from working with those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. There was. I mean, we had a lot of fun. A lot of not fun, but a lot of fun, right? So we used to go on these random camping trips, is what I called them. I'm sure, as a young,
just one night.
Some of them were multiple nights out in the middle of nowhere, 3 nights out in the middle of the mountains of Afghanistan. You're like, I don't know what we're doing, but we're out here for some reason. We weren't getting into ticks. We were just, my assumption is, looking back at it now as a slightly more mature, or at least slightly more knowledgeable, probably not any more mature at all, but slightly more knowledgeable guy, is we were probably out there as either a deterrent or reserve force for something else that was going on, some bigger operation that was happening with some other folks. So we were kind of on standby. But like we've got, especially considering where we were out in Coast Province and doing like just there was a lot going on. So it was the middle of the night. This is our first night on this particular camping trip, I think. Maybe it was our second, but I mean the mountains of Afghanistan are very, 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 very dark, like very dark.
Yes.
So NVGs were doing nothing. And this has nothing to do with anything other than just it's fun because we started talking about this. You have to have light
to amplify. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like there no moon, no nothing. I mean, it's dark. And all of a sudden there's what sounds like as a firefight close to us. And we're like, what is going on? So we jump in gun trucks. I'm driving this gun truck. And I've got my gunner like trying to tell me where to go because I've got NVGs on and I can't see anything. So at least he doesn't have, a bulletproof window in front of him. And he's like, turn right, turn left, turn. And so we're like trying to figure out, I can't get this. So we're just driving towards these bullets that are flying. And we're like, I can't see anything. Like, what are we going to do when we even get there? Like, we can't even see. Like, all we're going to see is muzzle flashes. So we get there and one of our terps comes running over to the truck. It's okay. We're like, what happened? Like, what's going on? He's like, no, it's okay. It was a misunderstanding. I was like, nah, dude, there was like people shooting at each other. Like you could clearly tell they were like, it was only two rifles going off, but they were in very different directions, but shooting at each other. We're like, no, that's not a misunderstanding. They're like, oh, so what happened was these commandos who were setting up our one of our perimeters. One guy didn't know that the other guy was going to be over there, and this other guy's collecting firewood, which he shouldn't be doing because he's about to build a fire while out on an OP, which is not where you build a fire, just in case anybody was wondering. So he was going to build a fire. So this other, like one of these commandos just starts shooting at the other commando. So the other commando ducks down and starts shooting back at the other commando. They're like, we're in a firefight, like with each other, you idiots. Like, what is going on?
It is just misunderstanding.
Exactly. One of my many fun commando stories from Afghanistan. But man, It was comical. But anyways, I was just curious. I had to ask a little bit about that part. But I will say that there was a guy that when I first started getting into some of this stuff that I chatted with. He has I don't know if he still has the podcast, but the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. And what he used to talk about was how many tools a veteran has in their tool chest that they don't realize are there for when it comes time to being a dad. All of the things that we were taught, and I say the same thing about business. All the tools that we were taught, all the things that we did that helped make the mission happen are things that we can use, tools that we could use to teach our kids to help make that mission get accomplished. All we have to do is kind of figure out how this tool actually fits. Instead of leaving it in the toolbox, like let's play around with them a little bit and figure out, okay, well, not very often did I think that jumping out of the back of a helicopter with an explosive detector dog to go search people's houses was going to be something that I could use to teach my kids. But sure enough, I come up with stories all the time that I'm like, so this one time, and I'm able to apply it in this kid's situation where they're like, it's a fun story for them, which helps them learn about it. It's a fun thing for me because I get to kind of reminisce about some of the things that Daddy used to do. And it's a tool that I just get to use. Like, hey, like this time that they were teaching me how to breach and I was blowing doors off the hinges. These are some of the safety things we had to go through. This is how much control they had over themselves and over the scenario. And this is how we control ourselves in these scenarios. And I could teach my kids how to do that. My 5-year-old is barely understanding what I'm saying, but it's a tool that I have in my toolbox to teach them in certain ways. So I'm going to throw that over to you. Kind of what sort of things in your military life have you used to kind of apply to being a dad to kind of say, hey, these are some things to, whether it's in leadership, whether it's in followership, whether it's in, whatever, like what sort of tools did you take from your military time that you are passing to your kids?
Well, definitely the biggest one is just knowing to quickly throw out the phrase or the command, do push-ups whenever they do something wrong.
Very Army. I was Air Force. We didn't do all that.
Yeah. Usually I say, hey, this is my friend Adam. He was in the Air Force, which you may have heard of. It's kind of like the military. But since you were a canine handler that actually went out with our guys, then like you basically were in the military. It's pretty cool.
Kind of. I still was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Without having to wear that on my shirt.
Yeah, it's the best way to do it. You guys, PJs, those are legit dudes. JTAX, Air Force JTAX. Much respect there. I think maybe this is I'm probably guilty of just not knowing that it's there to some great extent, like you were talking about. Maybe I need to listen to this podcast. But something that sort of informs from it's not a small tactical tool, but it's like a strategic thing for us, is the concept of mission and submission. So like submission is a dirty word in modern parlance, but mission is not. Like we can get away with kind of being, say, mission oriented. Okay, well, whose mission? Well, hopefully God's mission. So you're submitting to that. But what does submitting mean? It's submission. Your mission is a subordinating objective, or it's a subordinate objective, right? So the problem that we have as fragmented families is that we don't have mission command and we don't have a unified mission. If you've got 8 people in your family, you've got 8 different missions. You don't have a family, you have 8 individuals and no family unit to speak of. And so I think what we've been able to somewhat accomplish, and hopefully continues to color our family experience and the characters of the children that we raise, is always having a mission. Like if you don't have a mission, it's very disorienting. And like you're talking about being out there on this 3-day camping trip and you don't know why you're there.
Yeah.
And go figure, like that's the one where commandos start shooting each other, right?
Yeah.
Or in each other's general vicinity, as the case may be. And if we're really just dropped into this world and told, go find yourself, go define yourself, go redefine yourself, find your purpose, that's an incredibly large burden to lay upon a very young individual, for instance. Mm-hmm. But if you are brought into submission in this good way of a submission, you are actually able to contribute to something. You're actually able to become competent at things. You can tell children, oh, you're such a good little boy, you're such a good little girl. But if they don't find themselves to actually be competent at anything, they will not be confident. And they will think that that's a load of crap you're giving them. But if you actually give them the opportunity to learn and demonstrate that competency towards a greater mission that even the adults have, now you have that confidence that's based in a competence, in real skills that are contributing to real objectives, because they're leading, even in their play to some great extent, they're leaning into real life.
Yeah.
When a military unit comes home from a deployment or an exercise, usually they'll give you a little bit of time to, like, block leave, we call it, 2 weeks. Usually not more than 2 weeks anymore, I'd say. Sometimes they did it for a month. People got in too much trouble. But they give you 2 weeks of block leave to just let your hair down, so to speak, and chill. And then you were on to recovery if you didn't already do recovery when you got back. But after the mission came recovery, and everybody knew. Where there is no vision, people suffer. And I don't think our families have vision. So just going to church is not a vision. It's a good habit. Just going to school is not a vision. It's a good habit. So it's something we have actually worked at. Patrick Lencioni?
Yep.
Of course, right? Everybody does.
Yeah.
I keep bumping this camera.
Well,
I've got
this
cheapest little camera holder and it wobbles. You can't see it anyway because the internet's garbage, but when this uploads and it's super high quality, people will see it. Patrick Lencioni's thing for business and also for families, I'm trying to remember the name of the book. I can't remember. It's basically his business techniques brought down to the family level. And you're defining who you are as a family and what you do. And our family has basically boiled our two big things down to creativity and hospitality. Mm-hmm. And there's some reasons that hospitality is there just because of the church, just because of who kind of our personalities, but also it's there because of our military experience. So like when I was a young soldier in Germany, I went to this Cadence International Hospitality House that got me away from the dark, sinful, awful barracks in which, it's a depressing place to be. And I was shown hospitality on the other side of the world, and it changed the way that I look at things. And so when I was a accompanied officer in Korea, we kind of tried to duplicate that environment with like Bible study, dinner, ski trips, hiking trips, stuff like that for young single soldiers while we were there. And we try to do that with university students where we live as well. So we've got something that our family understands as kind of a family mission. This is apart from business. They understand the business aspect of it too, but the hospitality and then also the creativity. The creativity is part and parcel of the business, but then also our kids are really into music and writing stories and stuff. My oldest daughter has her music is on all the apps and stuff. She's not famous or anything, but she writes some really good songs, and we're fanning that into flame. I help her out with it. I do the sort of production, post-production, editing stuff with it, and that's who we are. We are creatives. We're storytellers, and we bring people in and shelter them and tell them stories and help them find their own story. That's not a very good answer to what you asked, but it's the closest I got.
No, I love it. I think that's it's leading me. So we finally built some solid core values as a family, and we've got them.
Nice.
I put them on canvas, and they're sitting above our dinner table, and we get to talk about them every week and like give examples of who did what over the past week. And it's been a lot of fun to be able to kind of like highlight that. And you have to highlight somebody else. Can't highlight yourself, but highlight somebody else and how you saw one of our core values in that. But I really, as you're talking about that, I need to sit down and like, what is our vision as a family and what is our mission as a family? That's not something that we've really done, because right now it's always been, wherever the military places us is kind of what we do, and we're about to embark on this whole new world of we get to do what we want now, where, mommy's retiring and she's done, and daddy's got done a couple of years ago. So now it's like man, oh man, like this is a prime time to really figure out what our vision and mission is as a family, so we can set ourselves up for a positive environment across the family. That not only like right now I try to, as much as I can, with a 9 and a 5-year-old, and our daughter's 1, so she's not participating as much as I'd like her to. She really needs to step it up and participate a bit more in these conversations. But I try to bring them in as much as I can. I know, what the dickens, jeez, kiddo, she's been slacking. But I want to bring them in and say, like, does this activity that we're doing line up with our core values as a family? And now to bring in the vision and mission as well. Like, is this in line with what our vision is as a family? Is this aligned with what our mission is as a family? I want to make sure that we we got some company.
I do. Let me show you this sweet little girl. This is Mercy Faye. This is my youngest.
Hi,
I don't
Mercy.
think she can tell you what our core values are, but they are on the whiteboard.
Nice.
She has a tape measure.
What do you have?
She's very proud.
You got your tape measure? That's awesome. That is awesome.
What did you ask me, sweetie?
I'm gonna leave soon.
Oh, where are you going?
Dentist.
Oh, okay. Do I need to do anything? Okay, you just want to hug me? Oh, I've been missing you today. We'll have to hang out when you get back, okay? We got all night. Nowhere to go. Love you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. She just had to say hi to me before she went to the dentist.
Of course. I always warn people, and I don't warn you, because we with both of us having internet problems. And I'll say this now: we're going to have a 2.0, because you're going to have to jump here in a minute. But we're going to have to continue this and have a 2.0. We had a late start, so it's a little bit shorter than normal. But my kids almost always come in. There have been episodes where all three of them are like on top of my head, and it's just it goes insane sometimes. But where I have to have a conversation after. I'm like, I don't mind that you guys come on, but I still got to be able to talk, like, just so you guys know.
Well, hey, when we do this again, let's try to tackle a question like we can tackle multiple questions, and we obviously will.
Mhm.
But maybe one of the things we can try to tackle is like, is it possible to build a business? And when I mean a business, I mean build a company. Like let's it's not just us, you know. It's not just I manage some properties or whatever. But with multiple like employees, like a larger scale of business, and have your kids doing their homework, ostensibly running in and out of the boardroom. Can you build the business in which your daughter can run into the boardroom while you're having a meeting and tell you she's going to the dentist and give you a hug and kiss? Because that doesn't exist for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, they're in this very sanitized, fragmented environment, and then, you know, they're not even, especially when you get down to the lower income. If you're in the service industry, you probably have a harder time making it to Sunday morning worship, right?
Mhm.
What's it mean to build a business where like both of those can occur, can be good?
Yeah, I love
Talk
it.
about
Yeah,
all
we'll
kinds of stuff.
definitely. I could talk about that for hours, but like I said, you've got 10 minutes before your next call, so let me go ahead and kind of wrap it up for here. I really don't want this to be done. But I will have to immediately get something else on the books to be able to kind of continue this out. But
Let's do it.
Keith, it was awesome being able to chat with you for a little while. I'm looking forward to 2.0, and I'm sure everybody listening is also going to be looking forward to 2.0 when that comes out. But if people want to reach out to you, learn more about who you are, learn more about what you got going on, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you, Keith?
Yeah. So in terms of like our podcast and website, it's called the Stay at Work Home, which is not stay at home work. It's the Stay at Work Home. Get it? Anyway, that's kind of a new thing. The fire got lit under my butt to go ahead and get that going because I have recorded, though it has not been released. I was on the 1,000 Hours Outside podcast, which is pretty huge. It was like, we got to do this thing we've been talking about so that we can, you know, capitalize on being there. And then I was like, I'm going to be on Adam's podcast. I better get it going because he's huge.
Yeah, that's what I am. Yeah.
And then on the business side, heartlandbunkies.com is where our cabin kits are. And, you know, our pitch on that is like, there's very few investments where making a 50% annual ROI is considered failure. But that's where we're at on our short-term rentals with these little cabins. But that's not really it. For most people, it's just extra space, right? It's so that they can have the grandparents over or the grandkids over without cramming the house full and making people not want to be there. And then obviously you can do the project as a family. And so you build memories together building it, and then you build memories together using it, staying in it, right?
Yeah. I love it.
So heartlandbunkies.com. Check out our kits. Give me a call. And we're also kicking off a short-term rental class. It's not really a class, it's a series of webinars. We only have the first, like the 101 thing scheduled, but that really dovetails into both businesses. Actually, we're feeding it from both businesses because it's something that families can do very, like it's one of the most easily attainable things for families to make that jump to be doing something that's productive and unified, setting them up for financial independence.
I absolutely love it. I'm looking forward to like, again, I'm imagining building already 3 or 4 of these things on a 100-acre forest and inviting everybody over that I can. I love having people over. I like it. I love having the house cramped, but I'll put a few of these out on the lot for sure. So we'll have all of that information in the show notes. Again, thank you, Keith. Thank you, everybody who's been hanging out, listening to this. Please be on the lookout for Keith Phillips 2.0 when that episode drops as well. But again, thank you, everybody, and we will see everybody on the next show.
Thank you so much for listening to the BizDad Podcast. We hope you found some value in your time here with us, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's show, please subscribe and share so you and your friends won't miss our upcoming episodes. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble, where we continue these discussions and share more valuable content. Be the dad you know you need to be and run your business in a way you're proud to share with your kids. Keep crushing it.